Welcome everyone to our expert Q&A, revenue management discussion with PriceLabs. And thank you so much to Anurag for being here and giving us some of his time. He is the co-founder of PriceLabs. And I'll bump it to Anurag to say more about himself in a minute. But if this is your first time joining an Astro expert Q&A, my name is Heather. I'm the Astro board president. And I'll just tell you a little bit about who we are. We are a non-for-profit 501c6 focused on providing professional development education to short-term rental homeowners. We have a lot of free content just available on our website. But when you join the community, we have a premier host here that gives you a little extra access to content and discounts. But this view of the community you're seeing is free. So we organize topics, we share videos like recordings of this Q&A, blog posts, discussions are happening about these topics in the community. And then to build our content and to provide this professional development, we work across other associations in lodging, educational institutions. We've had a few blog posts this year already from Penn State. Local associations, and then obviously, media and trends and experts in certain areas. So with that, that's who Astro is. I'm going to turn it over to you, Anurag, to talk about you and PriceLabs.
Thank you so much, Heather. And before going into myself, I did want to add, you highlighted all the partners who are experts that you collaborate with, but I've worked with you on previous projects, and I know coming from that you are yourself like one of the biggest experts out there on anything hospitality, right? So like the content coming out is really well vetted from that perspective.
Oh, thank you.
But coming back to PriceLabs, yeah. So hi everybody. I'm Anurag from PriceLabs. We started 6 years back or 7 years back, 2014, when one of us, the three of us were all in Chicago. One of us was hosting his grad school roommate's spare bedroom on Airbnb, and he was trying to figure out how to set pricing. And I happened to be working at United Airlines doing pricing and revenue management. So the question naturally came to me. And then we sat around and said, okay, this seems like a problem that a lot of people have, and there's no easy solution to it. And really started from that perspective to figure out what can be done. Like one of the big differences between like airlines and hotels and short-term rentals is airlines and hotels have a lot of their own data, like from previous years, from all the flights they run, from multiple seats on a flight. Whereas on homes, you have one home. You don't get to know if you could have raised prices. Once you get booked, you get booked. Like if there's a big event, you don't get to know what you could have done. So then started off from there to say like, okay, how do we gather more data? How do we show that? How do we use that for pricing? Started off there and been steadily growing. Started off with just Airbnb because that's where we came from in some ways. Like that was the first use case. But then now we've integrated to a lot of PMSs and recently did a Verbo integration as well. That was one of the most requested things out there for us. So very, very glad to have that behind our back now.
Yeah, I'm curious on that you had a lot of requests for this Verbo integration. This was a big announcement in the last week that not only are you can you send prices directly to Airbnb, but you can also send directly to Verbo. Do you find that request came from people with just a few homes? Mostly?
Yeah, it mostly comes from owners who are self-managing. We have a lot of customers who are also property managers who use a channel manager where they have their own direct booking website. They list on Airbnb, Booking.com, Verbo, and any other OTA that their channel manager or PMS connects with, right? So in those cases, we didn't really need to do it. But a lot of owners and individually managed or even small managers with 5 units, they sometimes don't use a PMS. They would request us. So what we had done way back, I think this was almost a year and a half back, is we created a Google Chrome extension to say, okay, instead of we hopped on a few calls with somebody to do some support, and one of our co-founders who's like the technical, like the software engineer, he hopped on a call, and he like the person on the other end was like, okay, the prices are synced to Airbnb, and then they went in and painstakingly one by one copied prices to Verbo, and he's like, okay, I can solve that problem. Like, so he created a Google Chrome extension to say download a CSV of prices from us
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
upload it to Verbo. So at least
Yeah.
you're not doing one by one. But then it was still manual because you were not like on Airbnb, we would update automatically every day. Like,
Right.
so when there is a last minute vacancy or if there is a gap created, we would automatically go and say, make the minimum stay 2 nights because 3 nights we won't get you a booking anymore if there's a 2-night gap. So we would do all those things automatically. But on Verbo, it was manual. Like you had to go in like once a week or whenever you get time and do it. So yeah, eventually now it's come to the point of, okay, this can also be automated. So very happy about that.
No, that's great. And that's kind of
Yeah.
like we jump right into the first question here is, so it is automatic. And I think, I don't know if you want to go live with the screen share right now and grab the screen share, but I did put the screenshot of
Right.
kind of the how-to of
Yeah.
uploading. But yeah, I'll let you take
Yeah,
it from
I
here.
mean, I can very quickly share what you can do, especially because when you have both Airbnb and Verbo, uh, we also have the capability for you to tell us that, hey, these two are actually the same unit. And it has multiple repercussions because it's the same unit. One is in billing, like when we bill, we count how many properties you use us for. And we don't want to count those as two. We want the count as one and one sort of additional. Um, and then also in anytime you make adjustments, instead of making adjustments to both the listings, you're now make it to one of them and it gets copied over to the other one. I can quickly share my
Okay.
screen and show this.
And all of the same, so like you talked about orphan nights where,
Right.
you want to decrease your minimum stay when you have those gaps to fill.
Mhm.
Is all of that functionality translating to Verbo now the same?
Correct. It
Okay,
translates one to one. Yeah, yeah. So if
that's
there are
great.
gaps and you have set up the rules to, I mean, it's up to you to set up those rules or not, right? Like there are folks who say, if you don't want to, some folks don't want 2-night stays at all. In that case, you don't need to do anything. Yeah. I saw a question pop up that said, if I'm using OwnerRes, is PriceLabs integrated there too? So we are integrated to OwnerRes, and OwnerRes is then connected to Airbnb, to Verbo, and probably other OTAs as well. So in such a case, when you are using a PMS, we would send updates to OwnerRes, and then OwnerRes would send it to all the different OTAs. And then you can set channel markups in OwnerRes to say, because each OTA charges a different commission or has a different structure, you can say when sending to Airbnb, add X%, when sending to Verbo, add Y%, and so on.
Maybe since we have that question, can you talk about that transition a little bit? So if you're managing your pricing in a PMS like OwnerRes today, you're
Yeah.
manually setting like the stay restrictions and actually maybe data entering like individual prices per day.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what that transition is like once you add PriceLabs and the rate automation piece?
Yeah, I can, let me share my screen. I think Heather,
Okay.
I'm not able to because you are right now.
Oh,
If,
okay.
yeah,
Here we go. Sorry about that.
and when I share screen, I can answer both the questions. One about Verbo and Airbnb and how to like combine those two, and then also the like if you already use a PMS or like even if you are on Airbnb, you have been changing prices on Airbnb. How do you go into using a pricing system at that point, right? So very quickly, like what you would do if anybody starts new, of course, none of these listings would be in their account, right? You can come in and select Airbnb, or you can come in and select Verbo. And if you have both the listings, you would select both and do it sequentially and put in your login and password. And you would then be prompted for next steps, like about verification of and stuff like that.
So sorry, Anurag, I would have to grab the listing from Airbnb to connect and grab it from Verbo to connect.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
like I have two. Okay,
Exactly. Without
okay,
you doing that, we don't know that you have a verbal
yeah,
listing. We don't know which listing it is. We don't have any permissions to go in and change anything. So yeah, you have to put both of those in. Once
okay.
you do that, you will see 2 rows in here. One for if you have one property, you'll see one listing that it will say Airbnb here, and then you'll have another one that says Verbo here. Like my account does not say that, but in your account it would. You could also, and I'm going to jump into some of our help articles, but
So then
what
you
you
just link them somehow, right?
exactly, you can essentially create a mapping between those two in PriceLabs,
Mm.
so that you can then say, make the Verbo listing my parent listing and Airbnb listing my child listing. What the benefit it has, one, I said it's about invoicing. So instead of charging you $20 for the first Airbnb one and $15 for the Verbo one, we'll say $20 for the Airbnb one, but only $1 for the Verbo one, because it's not really a home, another home. It's another listing of the same home essentially. But once you do that, the benefit that comes out is also in being able to manage. Like, there are a lot of settings you can specify in PriceLabs. You can specify a minimum price you don't want to go below, an average price for the year, which is very important. We give guidance on this, but every home is unique. You two homes in the same area across each other, everything else is the same, but just because one has more reviews than the other, one might get more bookings than the other. So there are a lot of factors that go in, and so you can set your base price, and we give feedback on the screens to say, hey, you're getting a lot of bookings or you're not getting enough bookings. That way you can go and say, okay, let me adjust the base price a little bit to see if that triggers anything. But whenever you make those changes, you'll always see an option to say, copy this to the child listing as well. So you're not making changes in two places, you're making all changes in a single place. So for example, if I were to say for May 25th to June 4th, maybe for whatever reason, I have decided that 350 is the right price. I don't want for those dates the system to do anything, just maintain the price at 350. In which case, in PriceLabs, I can go and do it. And then I can say, do it for both the listings. Don't just do for the Airbnb or the Verbo one.
And then just to clarify on the owner res side, if you have owner res, you're not linking any of these because it's just one listing from owner res and then
Correct.
that's sends
Correct.
everywhere.
And in owner res, you would see that owner res listing
Mhm.
is linked to these listings in Verbo, this listing in Airbnb, this listing somewhere else, and so on.
But outside of that little checkbox and the parent-child kind of setup,
Yeah.
all this functionality of being able to override dates and change length of stay, all of that is the same.
All of that is the
Okay.
same. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay. Here's a question.
Mhm.
I don't know if, can you see the question, Anurag? I can read it to you.
I've lost the Q&A box.
It's, is the homeowner making each price change or are they happening automatically? So this is a good fundamental question.
Yeah, that's pretty fundamental, right? So I can again, maybe it's better to just walk through the process here, like what happens when you import listings from Airbnb or Verbo or from both. You can essentially then review a calendar of our prices. So what you would see is essentially prices that are generated by us. These are recommendations, and we take into account a lot of market data to say what kind of trends exist in your area. And these trends can be seasonality, like seasonality in most markets is a very big driver. It could also be how far out a date is. Like if the date is last minute, generally the guidance is to reduce the prices because there's a less chance of booking. If it is far out, not do that. Also what day of week it is, also what holidays and events are coming up. So based on a lot of these factors, you can go in and say, we are going in and saying, adjust the prices up or down. The prices are adjusted up or down around what we call a base price. So you always have control to say, don't go below this value, don't go on average, keep the value 154. We also have a tool that helps you figure out what the right base price should be, so that based on what kind of unit this is, you can say, okay, this is where I want to be, considering where the market is and things like that. But
and Anurag, I was just going to call out too, the automatic change is always every night.
Correct.
Right.
As long as this sync switch. So this was important. When you import a property, we keep this switch off, because what we don't want to do is for us to update prices before you have looked at them. So when you import a property, this switch is going to be off, and you go and review the prices, you look at them, you make adjustments, you can change your settings. For example, you can come and say what kind of last minute discounts you want. We talked a bit about minimum stay, but you can say, I want a 3-night minimum by default. But if it is last minute, for example, if it's within the last week, I'm open to 2-night stays, because last minute people tend to book shorter stays. And then you can say, whenever there's a gap that's between 2 and 3 nights long, let's go ahead and reduce the minimum stay to be the same as the length of the gap. So although my minimum stay is 3 nights, if I get 2 bookings and there is 2 nights stuck in between, we will, because you have this rule, we will automatically change it. Very important for seasonal markets. You can also specify seasonal minimums. So you can say for specific seasons, what's your minimum price that you want to go to, and those kinds of things. Once you've done that, once you have looked at, okay, these price recommendations now make sense to me, that's when you go and say, okay, I'm open to trying this. And I've looked at how you can also go to this small little neighborhood data tab, which shows you how your rates compare to our rates, and also how do they compare to the market. So I know this is a graph which is not the easiest to read for everybody, but the black line is showing for the next year, what are the recommended prices from PriceLabs. There would be a dotted line that would be your current prices. It's not here because we have been updating prices, so they overlap. But in blue and yellow, it also shows you what's happening in the market. Like, are people raising prices for a certain season, for a certain event? So I know, for example, on this October 10th is Chicago Marathon, and our system has picked up that for that event, a few people have already started bookings, and we have picked that up and said, hey, something seems to be happening. We'll bump up your rates automatically.
That's a great example too, I think, in that if you know,
Right.
you could tell the system early and put those dates in with
Yep.
an added lift. There was a follow-up question that, you know, the prices in some markets can double seasonally, like these big swings.
Yeah.
Would you mind talking again about the way to adjust those min-max rates by season? I think you quickly showed it a second
Correct.
ago, but
I did. So there are two pieces there. One, in this listing, there is no, I haven't given any seasonality input. It's our system doing it by itself. But you can also come in and say, hey, sure, the system is doing it, I still want to give it input. So for most customers, we actually don't recommend using the seasonal settings, at least the seasonal base prices, because our system should be taking care of those already. But if you already know your market really well and you come in and say, hey, I want to create all, and this example is super detailed here. Let me try and pick something that's less detailed so that we can actually do something on the fly if that works. Yeah, so in this one, I haven't created seasons yet. I can go in and say for the first 2 months, my minimum price, for the first 2 months, my minimum price is, say, 160. And then I'm going to say till summer after that, and this is again making this up. Summer does not end in July. I'm going to make it 250. And then I'm going to say, okay, for the rest of the periods, my minimum price is 180. So this way, and this is just an example. If you're in a very beachy market, you would probably come and say, you know, till June, from July 1st to till the end of August is where my really high season comes up, and for that season, I'm okay doubling my prices, like make this like 320 or something. Sorry, 320. Right. That way, you can specify that, okay, in summer, just don't go below 320. I know this books up regardless of what the algorithm says, which is very important. Like with any revenue management system uh, or pricing system, the system does a lot. It's always better to also give it your input because you also know the property, the area really well. So if you have something that you know, go ahead and plug that in as well. Guide the algorithm to perform better.
one of the things that we started to talk about was like how often, you know, the rates are just automatically updated. And, you know, once you have these settings in place,
Mhm.
you obviously are monitoring, but that you can then trust the system.
Right.
Um, the area where you see the blue and the green, high demand,
Right.
I always think this is interesting to talk about too, because like in this case, you see that weekend where the 163 and 180
Right.
um, are priced higher than the weekend before,
Mhm.
but that tomorrow there could be like a spike of reservations coming into the market,
For
and that
this, yeah.
without human, it's not humanly possible for you to like know that every day, but
Right.
that's where maybe it's only a
Correct.
$10 increase, right? But it's 10 more dollars that you're going to get, or, you know, maybe talking through like,
Correct. Yeah, and that's more or less what's happening I mentioned the marathon dates, right? Like I mean, I know the marathon is there, but I haven't told the system that the marathon is there. And this is the marathon week, which almost everybody in Chicago knows because it creates all kinds of traffic problems. But the weekend before, there is something called Chicago Open House, which is like a 3 or 4 day event. It bleeds into the week as well, where a lot of buildings in Chicago open their doors so that anybody can go in and see. So it for an architecture, uh, somebody who's interested in architecture, this is a pretty big event and people come from world over. Um, but for an everyday person, unlike marathon, you don't get to notice anything happening, right? But demand does increase and people do book. And if I hadn't seen this, I'd be like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know why the prices are raised, but the prices are raised because people have started booking. A few people have started booking. Like occupancy is showing at 14%, whereas the previous week is 8%, right? So we see that, yeah, there is something happening. People are booking more than normal, and we are going to bump up rates because of that.
We had another follow-up. If an owner has a seasonal min and your data shows change in the market, which would be a reason to suggest a lower price? Like if I said, oh, don't go lower than 200, I think this
Right.
is the question. So Gila, maybe clarify
Yeah.
for me. And I am too high because maybe the market has fallen apart. There are events that were canceled or
Right.
whatever reason.
Yeah.
Would you send an alert to say, hey, your min price is too high?
That is something we don't do today. That is something we are looking to do, though, to say that, hey, yeah, like either have a small dot somewhere here that shows them alerts, shows customers alert, or just send them an email to say, hey, you're not getting booked because of this. What a lot of our customers do today is they do log in once a week. So we generally recommend at least logging in once a week to come and see how are your occupancy number or vacancy rates looking. So you get some sense of like very high level traffic signals to say, hey, in the next 7 days, 100% vacancy is in red. It says nothing is booked. These are my test listings. So generally nothing gets booked. It's nothing I'm worried about. But our customers would look at this and say, okay, maybe I need to do something about this because I'm not getting bookings. And then you can come in and say, okay, also then compare against the market, right? To say, where am I? So suppose you're a 1 bedroom, I can come in and see where are my prices compared to other 1 bedrooms in the area. And this is something we see very often. In low season and last minute, you want to be in the lower percentile. So low season is when right now the occupancy for Chicago is looking at like 30%. If only 30% of 1 bedrooms are getting booked, you would rather be on the lower end of the market and try to be booked. Of course, you can set a minimum and say, I just not comfortable going below 120 and things like that. Whereas in high season, you can say, in Chicago, we are expecting, especially with people getting vaccinated, that, okay, a lot more bookings will happen eventually. This occupancy will bump up. And if 80% of the homes in Chicago are expected to be booked, we are saying it's okay to be on a higher end of prices because your chances of getting booked are pretty high. So uh, you can come and
Maybe
see this. There is no alert right now, unfortunately.
one other thing I would add is on the calendar view, like if your minimum is too high, I
Right.
think that also starts to be really obvious because your rate is like the same every day and it's the
That
minimum.
is true. Yeah,
You're
yeah,
just like,
that does happen. Yeah,
all the blue days and the green days are like all the same, or there's no blue days, like it's
yeah,
dead.
yeah,
And yeah.
yeah. So that does happen. So like if I come in here, I guess what Heather you're saying is, if I come in here and say my minimum price is 150, um, you will start seeing that all of these days start hitting 150, in which case you're like, okay, the system isn't doing much. But yeah.
Anyway, I think we've derailed a little from the
Yes.
deck, but
Sorry
that's
about that.
okay. Those
Yeah.
were really good questions.
Yeah.
Um, maybe I'll just grab the screen back
Yes.
and keep going a little bit here.
I have stopped sharing. Oh, I see the questions now.
Um, so yeah, I think the new feature, you explain that, and the benefits. And ultimately, maybe we just on this question talk a little bit about, I could use this without having a PMS. So like, what would you see are the benefits of that, or maybe pros and cons?
of using with a PMS versus without a PMS?
Yes, I guess,
Got
right?
it.
Like if I don't have any
Yeah,
solution today,
right.
I can solve my pricing pain point by just using this solution. I don't have to also have a PMS.
Correct. Yeah. So the two things, like the two biggest pain points that come up when you are listing on multiple OTAs are one, and I think this is the biggest one, is how to make sure that two people don't book the same dates from two different OTAs. And that one gets solved by almost all PMSs very real time. Most channel managers, when somebody books on Airbnb, Airbnb will ping the channel manager. The channel manager will block off the dates on Verbo, for example. But there's also a system called iCal, which I'm sure a lot of people use. I mean, I don't know who developed the system, but it's super popular.
And we have a video tutorial on how to do it.
All
So
right,
yeah, we provide education on that at Astro. Yeah, yeah.
got it. Yeah, so that problem gets solved by iCal. Even if you don't use a channel manager or a PMS, you can set up iCal to say whenever a booking happens on Airbnb, go block those dates off on Verbo. Is there a lag on that one, or I don't know if it is real time or it's every hour or something like that?
I've heard that. So if you, what our VIT training video shows is you can iCal link Verbo, Airbnb, and Booking.com. You can
Okay.
actually
Yep.
iCal link all
Yep.
three. And that it's something just to keep an eye on because sometimes it can have be a little glitchy, but for the most part, it's pretty real time and pretty
Got it.
reliable. If and I think it's even more reliable if you're just doing two
Yeah.
channels, you know.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it must be reliable because I know a lot of people use it. People wouldn't be using it if it wasn't reliable. Uh, but yeah, like there is that system. So that problem gets solved. The other problem is how do you how do you make sure that your prices are consistent across, and they don't have to be same prices, because remember, if you put the price as $100 on Airbnb and $100 on Verbo, because their commissions are different, your payout might be slightly different. So you should account for that and have slightly different prices, some percentage difference, which is easy enough to calculate. Um, that problem is what we try to solve, to say, okay, you don't use a PMS right now, you can still have prices consistent across Airbnb and Verbo with that percentage difference for markups. The third problem is then, and these two are really in terms of frequency the most intensive problems, right? Like if you were to manually go block dates every time something happened, it would be a nightmare. Uh, Thankfully, there's iCal. Then if price is the same thing, you want them updated frequently. So if you had to do it manually, it's a pain. The third thing that also comes up where channel managers comes in handy, and they come in handy for the first two as well, right? Like they just make everything very seamless, is the content, like making the listing titles and photos and this and that all be similar and all be updated. Instead of updating it in every OTA, you, with a PMS or a channel manager, you update it in one place and they send it out. But those changes are less frequent, so a lot of people just do it manually as well.
Maybe I'll just try to summarize that this scenario of you can solve your availability price point with iCal. You can solve your pricing pain point with this PriceLab solution if you're only on Airbnb and Verbo. If you have pain points around content updates or like guest messaging, maybe
Yeah,
accounting, that's where the PMS really would be needed to
yeah.
solve that. Those
Or
pain.
if you wanted a direct booking website or more
Yeah, your own
OTAs.
book direct. Yeah, additional OTAs. Right, right. That's great. Um, And then I think we have just one more question. Yeah, you kind of talked about this already too, like recommending going in once a week, that you still should put your eyes on things as
Yeah,
a kind of recommended frequency to validate.
correct. So once a week, we generally recommend folks come to PriceLabs once a week if they're using us, just to see how things are going, how are rates looking against the market, and things like that, and make any adjustments if needed, right? But the other thing, uh, that when I read this question, I also feel like it's trying to address, are rates getting updated to the OTAs correctly, right? Uh, if that doesn't happen, we send you an update to say that, hey, we are having trouble updating your properties, and it can happen for a variety of reasons. Like one of the reasons I know it sometimes fails is if you put in a min stay of 30 nights in PriceLabs to say, like, outside of 6 months, I only want long stays, like 30 nights or during a period, uh, or something else. And in Airbnb, you have set a max stay of 7 nights to say, I don't want anybody more than 7. Then Airbnb tells us that, hey, these two settings are not compatible. You can't say 7 nights is my max and also want to say 30 nights is my min. So we'll ping you for that to say, hey, there's some issue there, and things like that. But even more importantly, it is equally useful, and this is regardless of whether you're using a pricing system or not. Just every once in a while, go to the OTAs and try to look for your property, see where you rank, see if you show up, see if the prices look good, see if the taxes, fees, and everything breakup is looking decent, and yes, make sure that all of that is showing up fine.
And then, yeah, I think this is that kind of golden question, like, how can I trust the system's going to do a better job than I'm doing?
Yeah, and this is a question we get all the time in some ways. And there are two things on this one, right? One is the system is doing its job, but it's also going to do its job with your oversight and your assistance. So there are two main things that the system, or any system, any pricing system, is trying to solve for. One is there information that you might not know of that we know of, and the system knows of, and this could be things like, there is this event before the Chicago Marathon weekend, or some unknown event in your area. You don't know about it, for whatever reason it slips under the radar, but we are seeing increased occupancy or increased bookings for it. The system is automatically going to know that and increase the rates for it. Or things like, if you only have one listing and you're sort of new to an area, you might not know what the seasonality looks like, so you can come to the system and see that. The other is, if you are super savvy, even if you know everything about your market, just making those updates is painful sometimes. Like having things updated all the time. So you might know that there's an event going on and you can increase the prices. What if it hasn't booked and it's 2 weeks out? Do you want to reduce those prices? Or now, are you going in every day and doing something about it or not? So if you know something, it's what the systems try to do is take your input on what you know, apply that on top of the stuff we know, and then automate that so that like things work well in conjunction in some ways, like to try to get to the best of both the worlds. And of course, uh, almost every pricing service has a free trial, and in almost every pricing service, when you sign up, we don't change your rates without you explicitly saying, yes, this looks good. So if you're super experienced, go to any pricing system, review prices, look at the calendars, make adjustments to the settings, watch a few tutorials. Like we do weekly hour-long webinars plus Q&A for all our new customers to say, can we answer any questions? And you can always email support to say, hey, how can we do this? This is my specific strategy that I want to execute. Can this be done? Do all of that, and then before you sync anything to Airbnb or Verbo, just look at the calendar. Does it make sense or not? If it makes sense, try it for a month. Go check every so often to make sure things are going as you expect, that your booking space has not dropped off, the prices are not too low, the prices are not too high. And as you do that, you gain confidence in the system to say, okay, I'm able to tell the system what I need to, and the system is able to do what it needs to, and this seems to be working fine. Hopefully, the goal is that it saves everybody a lot of time in not having to manually update, and because nobody has all the time in the world, also helps make more revenue, because now it's identifying spots where it could increase prices and get more, or reduce prices and get a booking where you wouldn't have gotten bookings.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think that was the kind of our final question. So again, joining Astro is free. We also have our Premier Host tier. come check us out, follow us on social. And yeah, big thanks to PriceLabs and Anurag for this time. Always super educational to talk to you, Anurag, and really cool the new stuff you're doing with this connection to Verbo and all the new features. We didn't get to the benchmarking stuff. We'll have to do a whole other section on your performance versus the market, right? That's a whole other topic.
Yeah, on that one thing I did want to mention was, like I said, you can connect your properties to PriceLabs to do the 30-day trial. You don't have to turn anything on. But once you connect your properties, we also give you a market dashboard for free for a month. So you can pick any address around the world, and you can see all kinds of trends for that market, like what's for different dates, what kind of length of stay is popular. For example, your minimum stay might be 3 nights. And we might show that, hey, in your market, like 30% of the bookings are 2 nights or shorter. At that point, you can continue to be 3 nights, but you could also say, okay, maybe I could open up 2 night stays as well and bump up my rates a little bit, because now I'm going to capture more demand. There are also markets where 7-night stays over summer and spring break are super popular, right? Where you can see trends like far out, people tend to book 7-night stays, and 70% of those bookings, 70% of all bookings in summer are 7 nights. But once it's a month away, nobody's booking 7-night stays anymore. Like, should I lower my minimum stay? Even if you don't want to use dynamic pricing, just being able to see that data. And again, if you connect your properties, it's free for a market for a month. That itself is super powerful.
No, that's, and we did get a more general question. So just being new to dynamic pricing, you know, there are several companies, Beyond Pricing, Wheelhouse are also mentioned. And then, you know, are they essentially, are all of you, right, essentially the same? And I would say, yes, Beyond Pricing, Wheelhouse, and PriceLabs are the 3 kind of larger players providing this type of technology. Then the question for you, Anurag, is, are there specific features that set PriceLabs apart from the others?
Yeah, so, and Heather, you're right that all 3 services are the major services out there which provide the dynamic pricing service. The big differentiator for us, at least in our minds, is how much control we like to give our customers. So one of the biggest things we recognize is an algorithm can know a lot. It can't know everything that the human being who knows the house, who knows the area, who lives there would know. And from that perspective, we do want to give our customers a lot of control. And when I was sharing the screen on the customization menu, you probably saw that there's like a ton of options which are optional. Like, you don't have to use them. For example, you don't have to set seasonal minimums, and you don't have to set seasonal base prices. But if you want to, if you're super savvy and you want to, you can go in and do that. If you don't do that, our algorithm will take care of things. But if you know something that we don't, that's where we try to sort of differentiate ourselves and trying to provide a lot of fine-tuning capabilities. Like, the system itself, without any fine-tuning, should work. But for somebody who wants to go in and do more, sure, yeah, that's possible as well.
And maybe just Gila, if you're, you know, where Astra's trying to just help get all of these questions answered. In June, we're just getting ready to announce our partner showcase, where we'll bring, actually the other 2 vendors also will be at the table to kind of do demos and things. But as Anurag said, this free trial opportunity is there. And so, yeah, I think it's figuring out what's important to you and making sure the system obviously has that feature.
Yeah.
So.
And all systems provide a free trial. So as far as I know,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, go try.
Yeah, and you can look, right, and see how it works in the usability without actually pushing the rates, which is also helpful.
Which is important, yeah.
To see if you like the UI and it works for you, yeah. Well, as always, Anurag, so awesome to talk to you and spend time with you. Thanks to those on the line for the great questions. And this has been recorded, so we'll continue to share this and continue the conversation. And have a great rest of the day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Heather, for having me. Yeah.
Talk soon. Thanks, Sam. Bye.